Hello everyone and welcome back to the Keep Productive YouTube channel. Today we're looking at Motion. It's not Notion, Motion. This is a to-do list style calendar application that is making waves as a sort of superhuman for tasks. So in today's video, we're going to overview the basics of it, give you an idea of things like the pricing and much more. Now we'll be showing this on the Safari version. However, I do know there is a Chrome version that has an extension that makes it a little bit easier to access. So what I'm planning to do is a separate video where I overview how it's like to use Motion for a week and sort of give you my personal opinions on it. Now, as you can imagine, Motion is saying they believe that to-do list applications are dead. And to some extent, I agree with them. I think not that to-do list applications are dead in the water, but that these new planner applications that are slightly more sophisticated in being able to help you or handhold you through the day are on the rise, and definitely against the proposition of a to-do list application, look a lot more interesting for planning your day. Now, this is a Y Combinator project, so obviously they've been funded through Y Combinator, and they've been around for about 2 years and are regarded as the more expensive option. So we'll talk about pricing later. Also, we do have a link in the description, which is an affiliate link. However, that doesn't change my opinion on this application, and I will be sharing my thoughts as I go from first take. So to start, there's sort of 3 core features about this. There's the calendar, the tasks, and the assistant. We'll cover that as we go throughout this video, and hopefully it gives you a better understanding of this application. So as you can see, this is sort of like a landing page, and it's quite nice to see what your coming up items are. So you can see your events, mainly your events. I don't believe there's any tasks. However, I haven't added any, so I'm sure they'll pop up here. So as you can see, when you're inside of Motion, this is the web version. If I go to calendar, this is sort of like your dashboard for the day, and it presents itself a different way of doing things for the primary reason that it tries to optimize your schedule based on the tasks that you do throughout the day. So for example, this week, I was adding these tasks, and I had actually an event in for that period of time. And what was interesting is it started moving the tasks around based on that. It's got quite an intelligent task calendar abilities where it sort of understands where the free time is. And if you've got a packed day worth of stuff to do, then what it's going to do is try to reallocate that based on how much time you've got left in your day and where it can fit the time in, which is quite cool. So as you can see, this is the sort of task calendar view. I'm going to hit day view, and you can see this is maybe the day ahead. And what I can do is drag an item on the calendar. Now, this actually comes up as a calendar event. So what I can do is, I'm actually recording YouTube at the time, so I'm going to press task. And as you can see, the task has been created. So maybe I'll give it a sort of verb to make it more task orientated, and I'm going to press create task. So one thing I did notice is on Elements when I was using it, it was slightly slower in parts, and I think that's probably because I'm using the less optimized version for it. Apparently the Chrome version is a little bit snappier, but just something to note if you're a Safari user, that I did find it a hair slower, and it probably does affect because my Wi-Fi hits up to 55 meg, which I think is a little bit lower than a lot of people's, but just something to note from my initial sort of outline. So what's nice here is you can open up your task and you can add things like duration. There's a few productivity elements of this that actually, in my opinion, I think they do help you a little bit further than some apps do, and they do it a little bit differently. The first of those is allowing split into chunks. I think sometimes I always have this problem where you do have a big task that you want to do, but it might be split into different sort of elements throughout your day or throughout the week. So what you can do is allow it to split into chunks that are sort of 45 minutes long. And what's cool is that helps you to divide the task. And when it comes to the allocation of, for example, when the calendar reallocates it, it'll start to split it into chunks to make it easier. So you can get that task done without necessarily sort of, degrading the task to be done in a week if it's important. You've also got priority levels, and again, the priority levels are a little bit different to what you'd see in other applications. An example here is you've got ASAP, which is, I guess, urgent, hard deadline, or a soft deadline. And soft deadline is, I guess, helping the system to understand, can this be moved further than normal? And then you've got someday as well. So if I had a hard deadline to do it by Friday, although I do want it done today, if I press save, what should happen is, because its start date is today, it should allocate it based on that. And you can also give it, for example, to be done in work hours. And this is quite interesting, because if you have something like a side project that you did have some time during the day to do, well, then you can give it an allocation of night, for example, and it will reallocate it in the future. You've also got recurring and notes. We'll come to that in a moment, and projects up here. Don't worry, we will come to that. Now, if I press save, what it does is it recalculates that task and sort of does stuff in the background to understand what that task actually can do. And what's great as well is it sort of gives this sort of check-in outline. And that's because now that's sort of like, I guess, I think what they were trying to explain is it's like a task that is potentially movable if other things came in. So just for example's sake, I'm going to say I've got an appointment at 10:30, and you can actually just have an event or a flexible meeting. And a flexible meeting is something that, for example, if you and your team are a bit more, maybe you're remote or asynchronous and you can adapt it, it works with other team members to reorientate it around both of your calendars, which is quite cool, because if both of you are using Motion or a team of you are using Motion, then it sort of re-engineers when you can have that meeting based on everyone's schedule and all of those attributes, instead of like having to do, like I say, a doodle on it or re-conversate around it. So I'm not going to click on the flexible meeting. I'll show you that in a bit. But let's say I have a meeting with Steve, who is the brilliant editor. Just a note on this side, you can actually add things like video conferencing through phone numbers, locations, Google Meet, Zoom, what you'd expect, and add all the regular stuff you'd expect to see inside of a calendar events experience, and also find another time. But I'm going to press create calendar. Now, as you can see, it sort of falls onto this one. So I would assume it would reassociate, but it hasn't. So maybe I'm going to pop it in the same sort of period of time and see whether it does anything. So it's strange. I don't know whether it says in the trailer that it actually sort of allows you to reorientate it when this one's, say, being able to move. So I don't know whether a task and a meeting can live at the same time together. Maybe what I'll do is I'll turn this into a task to see whether that gives any sort of difference and any sort of indication of a sort of conflict. Okie dokie, so you can see there when I created the task, it automatically nudged it forward. So what I believe can happen is a task can live next to an event at the same time. So if, for example, you have a chat with Steve, then this naturally would be deferred. However, it's a little bit complicated because I assume this one had a hard deadline, which is tomorrow, and the other one had a soft deadline, which was today. So that's where I think the assumption is. The soft deadline today overrules a hard deadline tomorrow because you have more time in the day. So that makes a bit more sense for me. Just sort of a bit of complication there to sort of explain it, but hopefully it sort of gives you a better idea of how that works. So if I go to week view, it obviously, what it quite nicely does is it will assign busy on your calendar. And that's quite nice. So obviously that's sort of the calendary aspect of creating tasks and events, and naturally we'll come to the assistant side of it. But this is where I think the experience gets a little bit sort of more interactive with tasks. Now you can see on this left-hand side, I've got a few tasks already. For example, over here, I had like some of these items like finish the sort of bento box and things like that. And I can open them up and I can see, for example, when the deadlines were. Now, when it comes to the task experience, I think this is actually quite nice. Tasks can be obviously organized in projects. So what's quite nice is it gives you a whole host of views that give you a better idea of how your tasks work. And in my opinion, I really like this and how they designed it. So obviously this is the schedule. This is, for example, past incomplete. And this is things that you've got to do now. And then it's also got things you could do today, rest of the week, and next week. So very much like a Kanban board. You can drag stuff into different elements. So if I want to say, okay, I'll reassign this for rest of the week, and I'm going to also reassign this one for ASAP. And as you can see, it gives you on instant prompts of how that interacts with the space. So what's nice is this constantly sort of learns about you and how it I guess, should affect your sort of day ahead. So for example, if I go update my schedule, what should happen is it now sort of orientates it towards the next day. The one thing, I don't know whether you saw that, but I did drag that up to the rest of today. So I'm guessing you can only do one action. I don't know why that's keeping coming back there. So I'm getting a few sort of bugs there, but I assume maybe it's because I'm doing it too fast. But let's go back to the calendar and see how that item affected the schedule for today. So it doesn't look like it affected the schedule for today, but as you can see here, the actual task has been allocated to ASAP, which I don't actually see it in my schedule, which is a little bit strange. So I'm having a few issues actually sort of orientating it towards things to be done today. As you can see, it's due today, but it doesn't somehow come up on my calendar. And whether that's something to do with whether it's because ASAP lives outside of those boxes, could be, but let me sort of try and get a better understanding of that when I do my review. So first takes, this is nice in terms of the concept, but I'm not sure how and why it's having issues being able to drag stuff into certain sections. So a little bit buggy, but as you can imagine, a fairly new tool, but shouldn't at this price be having any sort of major bug issues like this. So one of the things that you can do is organize it into projects. So if I go to Bento, a new project they're working on, you can move stuff between certain things, and that means that's now allocated as a project. What I like about this is that you've got a backlog for that project, which is something that you don't typically see inside of a lot of applications. So if you have something that is Bento related but backlogged, then you can organize your projects along here, which is quite nice. These are some of the dummy tasks that they do provide you if you wanted to get sort of going with them. And that's just something to note. You've also got recurring tasks. So this might be, say, a habit that you wanted to get started on. But what's nice is you can base the frequency on certain days and custom times so that, for example, the priority is must finish or try to finish. So you can sort of like narrow it down based on whether you want to do it as a forcible habit or whether you're lightly trying to do it during your day. And they make some suggestions like doing emails, exercise. It's a bit like, okay, if my schedule was mental, then these could be the things to go in the day. Now, one thing that I haven't touched on is you can actually quickly make some notes, and you can also make it one time. You can also link a project here as well if you want to. Notes aren't necessarily too in-depth, but again, something quite helpful. So over here, you can organize your scheduler, which is basically a booking for meetings. So for example, if I copied this link and I pasted it into Google or Safari, you can see here that now what it does is it connects with my calendar, and you can find all of the slots that I'm available on. So if it naturally blocks out stuff in my calendar as well, so obviously it takes today as like, you can set it up that the settings basically mean that today only availabilities start from tomorrow, which is perfect. I quite like that. And you can have some presets as well as a sort of custom linking and certain labeling that helps you to organize it into the right places. Flexible meetings are great for internal meetings. Again, if you use it with the other team members, it's probably a bit more effective. It's sort of like a way for you to find the best time, and something that, I don't know, if you used it with more than sort of 3 or 4 people, that might be more effective. Looks like you can add more calendars as accounts. I have a feeling that you can add the likes of other options like other Google Calendar items. Let's have a little look. So you can add Google Calendar and Microsoft as well for permissions. Now, these are just some of the additions. You can sync more calendars. You can naturally connect up your conferencing tools. You can sort your time zones out, and you can set up your schedules and basically your allocated working hours. And this is something I actually did when I started this full sort of tour. And it was quite nice because it actually took me 2 or 3 seconds to do. I really like this part of the experience. Now, the scheduler, you can have a maximum of 24 meetings in a day, but you can change all that, which is nice because sometimes they might, forcibly sort of get you on there. And you also got focus time as well, which I haven't sort of allocated, but this basically gives you certain blocks during the day where you can narrow down in on a project. So maybe I'll hit save on that one and just see how it populates my calendar based on it. So you can see here that what's happening is it's picking out 2-hour slots in my calendar where I have sometime free. So if I go to the next week, I'd assume that they've found that the focus time is probably best at 9 a.m. But for example, I'm guessing if I were to add a task of plan conference, my go-to one to demo with, and I just waited for it to a few seconds to sort of populate, I assume, yeah, it's moved itself a little bit further down. So it does understand that obviously it's something that you can't get out of. Now, one thing also as well, you see this lock icon, it's allocating it that it's a fixed time task, but that's something that I found was actually quite helpful when you actually go back to your Google Calendar. It shows in that block that you have a busy element of your experience, which is good because it allows people not to book meetings with you. I just want to overview this in terms of initial first impressions and sort of how I'm sort of thinking about it. The calendar experience, personally really like this mode, this view of it, and being able to sort of organize your day. And I personally think that it actually works better if you have more stuff in it. Obviously, that's sort of counterintuitive, but it's really designed for more time-pressured people that have lots of meetings. So, for example, if I was doing it yesterday afternoon with work, I think it probably would have done a good job of helping me find time of tasks. So, from some of the previews that I've seen, it actually does a good job of that. And I think what was happening was probably some bugs that I'm finding on the Safari version. I've seen previews of it working on the Google Chrome as well as the Google Chrome extension, and for what I've seen, it looks like it works a lot better. Again, obviously that's that conversation of like, yeah, it should work best on every platform, but again, it's just something to note whether it's sort of optimized more for that. They do have a Chrome Web Store extension, so that probably does sort of help to make the experience a lot better. So you can actually just view calendar up here. Going on to the sort of task experience, I actually do really like the way that they help you organize tasks. However, not impressed that this wasn't able to sort of reallocate stuff, or at least sort of like make sure that it does it. It's doing it now. Maybe I just encountered a small bug, but as you can see, it sort of didn't really do it the first time for one task. And it's a little bit confusing. Maybe I'm like, okay, so that's why. So anything past incomplete stays there, but you can see here that I've moved it into a different area. So I think it was more confusing for the end user than necessarily for me. But again, I might find that out from using it for a week. I think some of the booking assistant side of stuff is very cool, very easy to do. And that's something that I think probably is a nice part of the experience, especially if you have a considerable amount of meetings to have. Okie dokie, so let's take a look at pricing. Obviously, pricing is probably one of the most controversial elements of the whole experience of Motion. Its Pro plan comes in at a $19 per month, billed annually. So I worked that out in the UK, it's £13 per month, which if you pay for the annual plan comes out at £156 per year. Which, to be fair, if this is something that probably brings together everything and makes a bit more sense with combining everything, it actually works out cheaper than apps like Sunsama and even Akiflow, I believe, if you go for the annual plan. They do have a monthly plan and it was £23. It was $10 more. I'm not sure whether they have their pricing for their monthly here. I think it's something that they probably don't want you to go with necessarily because it's so expensive. But when I worked out in the UK, it was £276 per year, which again is very high investment. So I think if you were looking to go with this application, it's almost more sense to go with the annual because you'll end up spending like £120 more. It's like half price. It's like hard to decide. But then again, if you're trialing it for a certain period, the pain in the bum is that this application only has a 5-day trial period, and normally with these sort of applications you typically find a 14-day trial period. So as you can imagine, a little bit less than you typically get, but I guess it's a full working week to give you an idea. They do have this calculator down here, which I found when I was sort of investigating the pricing. But for example, it's like hours lost per week on distraction, context switching. So if I said like, okay, I think on average, and 2 hours a day, I'll probably waste. Maybe that's actually a bit over cautious. Maybe let's just say 1.5 hours a day or something like this. 6 hours a week. That's apparently $1,181. And that's the value of Motion. The cost of Motion and the ROI of Motion is actually you're gaining that much. But you can actually change your allocated hours. I'm gonna call myself quite cheap, and not cheap, but I'm going to lower it to $20 an hour. Is $20 an hour cheap? I don't know. But you can see there that the value of motion and the cost per month, you can see the ROI of your benefits of your work, sort of how much it impacts. So interesting pricing, interesting sort of outlook. As you can imagine, fairly new application, something that I'll be keeping an eye on, and I think would probably be better if I just did a week in review instead of like a initial first impressions like this. I did counter some problems, but I'll probably try it on Chrome. If you have any questions about it, feel free to pop them in the description below, or the comments below. This is just a general overview of it. Hopefully I can give you some better insights as I start to really understand it more and use it for a full week. But hopefully this was a helpful insight into what it looks like, how it works, and give you an idea of what it's most suitable against. And hopefully soon I'll be able to do a comparison directly against planner apps that are in the space right now. Thank you very much, folks. Please do subscribe if you're brand new, and make sure you hit the bell notification for regular updates on videos. I will talk to you all very soon. Thank you very much, folks. Cheerio.